5, 4, 3, 2, and 1.
Welcome to the Joint City Council, Brisbane GVMID Financing Authority, and Guadalupe Valley Municipal Improvement District special meeting. I'm calling this meeting to order at 7:31 p.m. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And just a note before we get started, we welcome speakers to provide public comment during this meeting, but please be advised this is a limited public forum. As such, speakers must stay on topic if speaking to a particular agenda item. And if speaking during general public comment, they must address matters within the subject matter jurisdiction of the city. If speakers fail to follow these rules, they will be warned. And if they continue to disregard our rules, their opportunity to speak will be ended. With that, I'll turn it over to the city clerk for a roll call.
Councilmember Cunningham.
Here.
Councilmember Lentz.
Here.
Councilmember Mackin.
Here.
Councilmember O'Connell is absent, and Mayor Davis.
Here. We will move on to adoption of the agenda. Can I get a first and a second to adopt the agenda as it stands?
So moved.
Second.
Councilmember Cunningham.
Aye.
Councilmember Lentz.
Aye.
Councilmember Mackin.
Aye.
Councilmember O'Connell is absent. Mayor Davis.
Aye. We'll now move on to awards and presentations. Item B, Proclamation for Domestic Violence Awareness Month. And I'll go ahead and read that out loud. Whereas more than 1 in 3 women and 1 in 4 men and 1 in 2 transgender individuals experience some form of physical or sexual violence and/or stalking by their intimate partner in their lifetime. And whereas the marginalization of certain groups in society, including undocumented individuals, transgender individuals, and people living with disabilities, increases their vulnerability to domestic violence. And whereas there are 7,945 requests for service through Community Overcoming Relationship Abuse, CORA's 24-hour crisis hotline and law enforcement referrals last year, and 12,991 adults and teens received community education on healthy relationships and the impact of intimate partner abuse. And whereas in San Mateo County, 112 adults and children were provided emergency shelter and 79 households were provided long-term rental assistance to escape their abusers last year. And whereas 479 adults and children received therapy to help them with domestic violence-related trauma, and CORA fielded 1,973 requests for legal assistance. And whereas the City of Brisbane, as part of San Mateo County, recognizes the critical need for county-wide services in order to support our residents. And whereas intimate partner violence continues to be one of the most underreported crimes, and the City of Brisbane is committed to eliminating all forms of intimate partner abuse. Now, therefore, be it proclaimed that the City of Brisbane hereby designates the month of October 2023 as Domestic Violence Awareness Month, to raise awareness about and encourage all residents and community members to do their part to help rid our community of intimate partner violence. And Norma Alfaro from CORA, which again stands for Community Overcoming Relationship Abuse, is here to accept the city's proclamation.
Thank you very much. It is so important, especially now that we have had in San Mateo County 5 murders, all of which were based on intimate partner abuse. It was no other crime. That was it. So bringing awareness to it is very important. We are now have a speak up program as well, where we are going out based on the cities to businesses to provide education, knowledge, and tools. So hopefully if anyone is ever presented with an opportunity to help someone in this situation, they have those things readily available to them. They're the tools. Thank you very much.
Thank you for all you're doing in our county. And I will go ahead and present this proclamation to you. And I think that Ingrid will take a picture. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much.
And I'm not sure if you're all aware, but item C, proclamation condemning anti-Semitism and hate speech. We have this on the agenda because there has been a rise in anti-Semitic comments from across different meetings in San Mateo County, and the city of Brisbane wanted to reiterate how there is no place for anti-Semitism in our community. So with that, I'll go ahead and read the proclamation condemning anti-Semitism and hate speech. Whereas anti-Semitism and hate speech remains a serious and growing threat to Jews in the United States and around the world. And whereas over the past month, residents and staff of neighboring cities in San Mateo County have endured hate speech calls during public comment at city council meetings. And whereas nearly 1 in 3 Bay Area Jews said that they experienced or directly witnessed anti-Semitism in the last 3 years, according to a 2022 survey by JCRC Bay Area. And whereas anti-Semitic views do not represent the views of Brisbane and the greater community, but a small fringe part of the population that targets Jewish communities and other historically marginalized groups. And whereas history has shown, with the killing of 6 million Jewish people in Europe during the Holocaust, anti-Semitism is a danger to the entire community, our country, and our world. An attack on any part of our community based on race, religion, gender identity, or ability is an attack that weakens our social fabric. And whereas standing up to anti-Semitism and all forms of hate and discrimination makes us stronger together as a community. And whereas, as stated in the adopted City of Brisbane Resolution number 2020-47, the City of Brisbane will oppose any attempts to undermine the safety, security, and rights of members of our community, and will work proactively to ensure the rights and privileges of everyone in the city, regardless of race. And whereas the City of Brisbane stands firmly behind the preservation and protection of basic human rights, dignity, health, and well-being of all people, and encourage community members and organizations to foster a sense of welcoming, belonging, and inclusion. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the City Council of the City of Brisbane does hereby condemn anti-Semitism and all forms of hate speech and stands with the Jewish community. And Alejandro Padron from the Jewish Community Relations Council is here to accept the city's proclamation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mayor Davis and City Council members. My name is Alejandro Padron, and I am the External Relations Associate at the Jewish Community Relations Council of the Bay Area. Thank you so much for enabling this proclamation. It comes at a very crucial time, as you mentioned before. We have been targeted in the Jewish community recently, and we have seen a trend. Unfortunately, it has been during the Jewish holidays, the New Year Jewish holidays, Rosh Hashanah, and it's really unfortunate that this have happened. So we thank you so much, and we thank the council for extending this. We think that these attacks are based on ignorance and misunderstanding of the Jewish identity. So initiatives like this are really important to keep the hate outside of our communities, recognizing Jewish holidays, providing diversity space and inclusive space for everyone to express themselves with respect are really important. So thank you so much for this. And we will continue to work against anti-Semitism in the Bay Area.
Thank you. We appreciate all the work you're doing. And here's the proclamation for you. Yes, and I'm sure Ingrid will like a photo. Thank you. Okay, that brings us to item D, National Fire Prevention Week. And I have another proclamation. Proclamation of the City of Brisbane designating October 8th through 14th, 2023 as Fire Prevention Week. Whereas the City of Brisbane and North County Fire Authority are committed to ensuring the safety and security of all those living in and visiting Pacifica and Brisbane and Daly City. And whereas fire is a serious public safety concern both locally and nationally, and homes are the locations where people are at greatest risk from fire. And whereas according to National Fire Protection Association at home, the place people feel safest from fire is where they are at greatest risk. And whereas cooking is the leading cause of home fires, with nearly half, 49% of home fires involving cooking equipment. And whereas unattended cooking is a leading cause of home cooking fires and related deaths. And whereas create a kid and pet-free zone of at least 3 feet around the cooking area and anywhere else hot food and drink is prepared. And whereas Brisbane's residents should install smoke alarms inside every sleeping room, outside each separate sleeping area, and on every level of your home. And whereas Brisbane's first responders are dedicated to reducing the occurrence of home fires and home fire injuries through prevention and protection education. And whereas the 2023 Fire Prevention Week theme, Cooking Safety Starts With You, pay attention to fire prevention, reinforces the critical importance of developing safe cooking practices within the home. Therefore, I, Madison Davis, Mayor of Brisbane, do hereby proclaim October 8th through 14th, 2023 as Fire Prevention Week throughout this city, and I urge all the people of Brisbane to be aware of their surroundings. Look for available ways to in the event of a fire or emergency, respond when smoke alarms sound by exiting the building immediately, and to support the many public safety activities and efforts of North County Fire Authority and emergency services during Fire Prevention Week 2023. So Safety Inspector Orlando Arguon is here from North County Fire to accept the proclamation.
Thank you on behalf of North County Fire Authority. Thank you for having us today, Mayor and council members. And we also like to remind the community of testing their smoke detectors and always taking kitchen safety very serious. And also that we'll be at the Day in the Park this weekend, and we'll have a lot of information provided to the community. And please stop by the booth and discuss fire safety with us. So thank you very much.
Great, thanks. We look forward to seeing you there. Here's the proclamation. Hand that to you.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. And here goes Ingrid. Thank you.
All right, take care, man.
Okay, that brings us to item E, presentation on the job development component of the city's Equitable Communities Revitalization Grant, ECRG. And I believe we have Marlena Sessions from San Mateo NovaWorks and DeAndre Booker. Wait, how do you say it? Booker? Booker. Young community developers. So go ahead, Marlena.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and honorable city council members. Marlena Sessions. I'm the executive director of NovaWorks. NovaWorks is your local workforce development system and board in this region. We've been around for about 40 years, but only in San Mateo County the last few years. And I'm rather new myself to the Bay Area. One of the first things I saw when I got here was beautiful San Mateo County was not getting as much as it's due in terms of the federal program that we are, which is your local taxpayer dollars, yours and mine, to put people to work. Whether that's the unhoused all the way up to the mid-level career professionals. If anyone finds himself out of work or wanting to make a shift in careers, we work with both the matching on the talent side and then on the employer side as well. So we are located in San Mateo, but we're now recently outstationing all over San Mateo County to make sure we're really getting to the pockets of underemployed, certainly economically disadvantaged, and those who have been historically left behind. So we're doing outreach, making sure that we're in libraries and community organizations, et cetera, and not sitting in our offices waiting for folks to come, which frankly they did before the pandemic, but now we're finding we need to get out and let people know where we exist. So again, yours and my taxpayer dollars through the U.S. Department of Labor. The real stars of the show tonight are the fact that we've entered into a unique and wonderful partnership on the environmental program that you're about to hear about from DJ. And this is fantastic for NovaWorks because again, it really speaks to, we are doing outreach as part of this grant. And we want to thank you, the city, and certainly BDI for the opportunity to do that outreach. Again, finding the folks who could benefit from this great program, get into some great environmental tech positions. So I wanted to just let you know tonight that NovaWorks is here. We also definitely want to let you know that if a you know of a job seeker at any level needs help, we can do remote work, we can do in person, we can do one-on-one. We have fabulous career advisors who can help. And then if you know of employers looking for talent as well, our job is to make sure that that happens in real time. So I'm happy to answer questions, but I'm also very interested in letting you meet with Mr. Bruchter and hear the great work and the partnership that we're about to embark upon. Thank you.
Councilmember Cunningham may have a question for you real quick.
Absolutely, please.
I did. So in this program, sorry to interrupt you. In this
Thank you.
program, I know we have a lot of our older adults in Brisbane asking about getting some work. You know, it's like they're retired, but they are not wanting to sit in front of the TV.
Absolutely.
So is there a space for them too?
Absolutely. So NovaWorks definitely has a mature worker program. We're seeing our demographics are aging, the gray tsunami as we call it. We're seeing an older and older population. So regardless of the career path, regardless of the employer and type of work, we can definitely help mature workers. And then I'll let DJ talk about mature
Okay.
workers in his world as well.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, I have a
you.
question too, real quick. If you are already working somewhere, but you don't like your job, and especially for a mature worker, there's a risk if you quit your job, you know, before you have the next one, that you won't get the next one. So do you work with people who are presently employed but looking to transition into something else?
Absolutely. So it could be everything from an underemployment situation or just wanting to make a career shift. We do, and we try to make that as convenient as possible time-wise for folks, so we can, again, meet people in the evenings or by phone remotely on Zoom. I would also say that we have, again, federal US DOL dollars to put people into training. And we've also noticed, since you brought up mature workers, there's definitely a digital literacy component to that. People interested in finding out how to get back into the work world and get their digital skills up. So happy to, again, it's the demographic that's growing, and we're happy to help, absolutely, whether you're shifting careers or fully unemployed.
Awesome. And then I know Councilmember Mackin has a question.
Yes.
You mentioned outreach now in different communities.
Yes.
For anyone watching this broadcast or interested, we have the phone number posted, but what would be the closest location to Brisbane?
Right. We would probably meet at a location like a library or a CBO, and we're looking to expand into Daly City, into South San Francisco, et cetera. So we'd love to come to Brisbane as well. So I'm very interested, again, in making sure we expand to all the reaches where people have needs. And our novaworks.org is a great place for people to start, an easy place. If they don't want to make that phone call, they can certainly look and go online and see where we can assist.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Okay,
Okay.
DJ.
Thank you for that, Marlena. And thank you so much for having me here this evening. And I want to say thank you to you all for your public service. I was sharing with Chief Macias, I'm used to being on the other side of the dais as a former San Francisco Police Commissioner, and I actually serve on the San Francisco Sheriff's Oversight Board. I have a meeting tomorrow from 2 to 5 every first Friday of the month. But in the daytime, I am the Chief Executive Officer of Young Community Developers, which is a 50-year-old grassroots organization based in Bayview Hunters Point. And I heard that Mayor Davis likes us to be very concise, so I'm going to read. So Young Community Developers, at Young Community Developers, we believe that every individual should have the right to sustainable and generational economic mobility. We impact lives through a holistic support and service delivery. Positively impacted lives empower people to break cycles of poverty for themselves, their families, and their communities. That's our mission. Our vision is we aim to break the cycle of generational poverty for communities of colors. The solution and way in which we do this since 1973 has served San Francisco's most underserved and most under-resourced communities, where meeting primary needs is an ongoing challenge. These historically underserved communities comprise San Francisco's Bayview Hunters Point. Our customer base is among the most severely underemployed, who are also facing environmental impacts, which have ushered in a unique set of racial and health inequities. So YCD believes that the inclusion and social connection are fundamental to addressing the city's facing low income individuals and people of color. This is not just YCD's belief. The benefits from the inclusion is supported by research and public policy, as we all know. YCD provides multiple benefits to community residents in the southeast sector of San Francisco, such as a workforce training and career placement pathways to college, and increased housing and stability and affordability. Our core services at the organization start with housing. YCD focuses on developing new housing, acquiring and preserving existing housing, and advocating for neighborhood preservation and providing direct services to prevent displacement. Education. YCD mobilizes and empowers racially underrepresented individuals in the pursuit of advanced higher education and beyond. Our programs provide residents with a framework to make, reach, and fulfill their goals. And lastly, workforce, which is why we're here. YCD is committed to establishing career pathways across various industries for community residents with a high-risk population. And our largest population is transitional age youth for us. So ages 18 to 24 is the largest population that we work with in San Francisco, and also focus on those who have been formerly justice involved. Now, as an organization in 1973, we were founded upon the precipice of workforce development, providing services for folks in community that didn't have access to jobs. And so a group of individuals came together. There were 7 of them. 1973, they go to City Hall and they shared with the mayor that we need resources to ensure that folks in our community get access to the jobs that are here. Don't know what happened behind closed doors, but those individuals came out, and $75,000 later, the organization was started and founded, and we have been rocking and rolling ever since. So we're really looking forward to, and for the last decade, and I've been at the organization now for close to 12 years, over the last 10 years, we've worked with the Environmental Protection Agency and another community-based organization by the name of Hunters Point Family to provide EPA job readiness training for folks in Baby Hunters Point. We do 2 cohorts a year of 15 individuals. We take them through a 12-week training program, and when they come out, they get certifications in lead, asbestos, confined space, flagging, and then we've been successful enough to put 93% of those individuals, which is 300 over the last 10 years, to work. And so when we got approached by BDI and now connecting with NovaWorks, we feel like we've got it. And we're just so excited to be here. We're happy to be expanding as an organization. When I first got to the organization, we were a 9-person operation. We have over 121 full-time employees. 75% of them actually live in the city and county of San Francisco and in the neighborhoods that we work in. So we've been doing this for a very long time and looking forward to expanding, sharing our wealth of knowledge and our wealth of training.
Yeah, I think that's
Thank you.
excellent. You know, I'm really glad that you that you're identifying that particular group of individuals, right? I mean, when kids are in school, there's the safety net, and then once they graduate from high school, you're on your own, kid, right? And you know, young minds are still developing. Right? They're not fully formed until they're like 25 years old. So that's such a critical time in their lives if they're, you know, going down the wrong path, to have some place to help them, you know, get skills so that they can then mature and then take those skills and you know, provide a livelihood for themselves.
Absolutely.
That's awesome. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
How did you get hooked up with BDI?
So we actually, I got approached by BDI actually very early on. Greg and I had a conversation when I first got to Young Community Developers, especially on the work in Sledge Lock in San Francisco. So we began to have conversations there around workforce. And then most recently, in the last couple of years, we actually rent space at 150 Executive Park, where their offices are. And then we got connected with Stephanie. And have begun to have conversations around what they were looking to do. And we had actually already worked on some Brownsfield projects before, previously as well, too. So it was just perfect marriage.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Great. You have a question?
I was just going to make a suggestion. Within San Mateo County, I'm familiar with foster youth program. They could really use your expertise because they face the biggest challenges coming out of what they call emancipation from a foster family. And it's very sad. It's really rough for them the first 3-4 years. And anything to get a foothold and get some sort of a job and a career would really be appreciated. So you might want to talk to San Mateo County about about that as well.
Okay, no, and I appreciate that, Colin. That's a large population that we
It
also
is.
serve as well too, as Councilmember Lentz was sharing. So to see those folks come through our doors as well too, we do any and everything. We don't turn anyone away. We're a neighborhood job center, which means if you walk through our doors and you need assistance on job readiness training, computer usage, it doesn't matter. We'll help folks.
You have to live in like 94124, 94134, 94107.
That's correct. That's
That's
correct
the
for us.
territory. So if you're out,
Correct.
if your zip code's outside of that, you don't qualify.
Not necessarily, but I think what we have the opportunity to do, especially with working with NovaWorks and some of the other community-based organizations. One of the things we also do as well too, why you see the connection with NovaWorks is as an organization, we'll never go into another community without making sure that we're working with the folks that are boots on the ground in that community. So being able to offer that support around the training and what it is that we do alongside NovaWorks allows, for folks. But for us, that's our flyer that goes out in San Francisco, and because of the funding we get, it's specific to the zip codes.
Got it.
Yep.
So can you describe like what the time commitment? So it's a 12-week training. How long is that? Like, can you still work a regular job and then go to night classes, or what's the time commitment?
Can absolutely do night classes. It is a commitment. It's generally for the first 8 weeks, it's 4 hours, and it's soft skills training. So we're teaching individuals how to come in to go to work. Make sure you're not on your cell phone. How do I engage and interact with my supervisor when something arises or goes wrong? And then those last 4 weeks, they are actually there for 8 hours, because that's when they get the certification training. So what we've been able to do, as you guys were talking about workforce, we have some supplemental programs. We have a great relationship with the Golden State Warriors that allows folks to supplement where they're able to work in the evenings, like during the games. So individuals that need to work, they can, but full-time, not necessarily.
Got it. Okay.
Mhm.
Thanks.
No problem.
Anyone else have any other questions? Thank you so much. for
Thank
coming.
you.
Very informative. Thank you.
Yes. Love that. Okay. So with that, we'll move on to oral communications number 1. This is for members of the public wishing to speak on an item that's not on the agenda and is within the subject matter jurisdiction of the city. Is there anyone wishing to speak at this time?
There are none, Madam Mayor.
Okay. So we'll move on to consent calendar, and I understand Councilmember Mackin wishes to pull consent calendar item O for a later meeting. Okay. So with that, I'll entertain a motion for items F through N and P.
So moved.
Second.
Councilmember Cunningham.
Aye.
Councilmember Lentz.
Aye.
Councilmember Mackin.
Aye.
Councilmember O'Connell is absent. Mayor Davis.
Aye. Item Q, new business. Consider introduction of draft ordinance amending Chapter 10.52 of the Brisbane Municipal Code to incorporate transportation demand management TDM requirements.
Well, thank you, Honorable Mayor, members of the council. As you're aware, Transportation Demand Management, or TDM, as we'll be referring it to this evening, refers to a series of programs, policies, and strategies that aim to reduce vehicular travel, primarily single occupant car trips. And the benefits of effective TDM is to alleviate traffic congestion, reduce vehicle miles traveled, and reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So it's kind of the overarching objectives behind the program. CCAG has updated its mandatory countywide TDM policies in 2022. As a part of that program, they did provide local jurisdictions the opportunity to develop local ordinances, which are either at least as effective or more stringent than the TDM, the countywide TDM policies. And this issue, we brought it before the city's ad hoc TDM subcommittee, which was council members Cunningham and Lentz, to discuss this issue. And it was the subcommittee's suggestion that we move forward with a local ordinance because that would be more reflective of some of our unique needs and circumstances, and also give the city to be an opportunity to be a little more aggressive than the countywide strategies. So we decided to move forward with a local ordinance. So that's what's before you tonight. There's a series of kind of steps, or the next slide, please, Ingrid, or components to this. There's the draft ordinance, and then there are several implementation measures related to the planning and monitoring, and then some suggested supportive actions aside from the ordinance. So we'll start with the ordinance itself. Again, it's consistent with a series of general plan policies we have, which promote TDM as a means to provide the environmental benefits I specified earlier. And it also is consistent with CCAG's TDM policy. It's consistent and actually more aggressive than the TDM by the county. Let's see, and the next slide will show kind of some of the differences between the city's ordinance and then the CCAG kind of countywide ordinance. We require a higher shift away from drive alone. So the county's tries to get about a quarter, a third to a quarter reduction in drive alone. The city's percentage is more along the lines of approximately 50% or 48%. The monitoring that we require for TDM is more aggressive and more rigorous than what CCAG is recommending. And then their enforcement mechanisms are tied to our local ordinance are more stringent as well. The CCAG tends to have more of a voluntary sort of basis, but we believe there's a need to have some enforcement teeth to enforce compliance in the long term. So there's some of the key differences. So the ordinance itself, as shown on the next slide, Ingrid, would replace our current section of the municipal code related to transportation system management, or TSM. Ingrid, can we have the next slide, please? Oh, sorry, you went one back, sorry. I sped through. One more, please, forward. Thank you. So it applies to projects that generate either 100 daily trips, exceed $500,000 in construction costs, or involve alterations or additions that trigger other building code requirements or municipal code requirements for improvement. So those are the three criteria, projects that are subject to the TDM. And then there is a sort of a tiering system of requirements based on the scale of project and the type of project. Tier 1 are the sort of least intensive project that have the smallest sort of trip generation levels. So they're relatively simple measures to be done. Tier 2 are projects that have moderate traffic impacts, something like the industrial uses in Crocker Park, for example, and office and R&D less than 50,000 square feet. And then Tier 3, which are the most impactful in terms of traffic, are office and R&D in excess of 50,000 square feet. So those are the three tiers. And each tier, as shown on the next slide, has a series of requirements. So, as shown on this slide, there are a series of requirements that are applied to Tier 1. Then for Tier 2, they have to comply with all Tier 1 plus a series of additional measures. And then Tier 3 projects are additive. They comply with all the Tier 1 and Tier 2 requirements, along with a series of additional requirements, as outlined both in the presentation and in the staff report you had this evening. So there are other companion actions or steps along with the ordinance this evening. There was a suggestion or that the council direct staff to adopt enforcement fines, particularly on the Tier 3 projects. The concern is that our current municipal code violations would be sort of a pittance, financial pittance for a project of this scale. So we're suggesting that instead some of the fines for violation of TDM be tied to the number of employees. And that would be brought back to the council at a later time. But we think there's probably, if you want to get people's attention to comply with this ordinance, you're going to have to put a little bit of teeth behind it. There's also some suggestions that were sort of discussed in the attachment about aligning park and bike requirements to TDM, particularly in regard to establishing parking maximums, which isn't normally how the city does business. We usually establish parking minimums. But if you're really trying to promote alternative vehicle use or carpooling or transit, one of the ways to do that is to constrain the parking supply for projects. So they do have the motivation and the incentive to pursue alternative means of transport. There's also the question of a transportation impact fee. I know the council's talked about impact fees at various levels. There's also an opportunity to establish a transportation impact fee. And again, for the council or anyone to move forward with that, we would need to initiate a nexus study to determine what that fee amount might be reasonably. And then that could be considered in your other broader considerations of some of the other impact fees you might be considering in the near future. And lastly, then procedurally, since we are proceeding with our own local ordinance in lieu of the TDM CCAG's policy, we need to receive an exemption, or request an exemption from CCAG. So we would also request that the council enable staff to request that exemption. So with that, that's a very short overview. We have both staff and Matt Goyne from Fair and Peers, who was the city's consultant in developing this TDM strategy and ordinance, and they're available and glad to answer any questions you have this evening.
Councilmember Cunningham, do you have questions?
I do. Please give me a minute. I'm looking for something specific.
I'll come back to you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Lentz?
All right. I know I do have a lot of questions, so I know calling you, if you have some questions, then I can probably check some off. Okay. Yeah, if you wouldn't mind.
Thank you. Transportation impact fee. I'm taking the excerpt out. For potential infrastructure improvements, are these earmarked for any one particular, or I should say restricted to any one particular segment of infrastructure or any particular area?
Geographic area, there would not be any limitations in terms of the practical usage. It would be for, I think, as long as you can make the argument it's improving the transportation network, promoting non-single automotive trips, then the city should be able to expend those funds in that manner.
So could those funds, as an example, be used for a shuttle?
Yes,
Okay, so that could be a city-funded shuttle as an example.
correct. Or can help contribute to somebody else's shuttle system.
Right, okay. And second question, just as a clarification for anyone, especially watching this broadcast, the tiers, the different tiers, tier 1, 2, 3. Tier 1, which is the, I would say the lowest point of enforcement. Could you just address a little bit so that anyone watching that says, oh my, I've got a residential project, is this going to affect me? Because in the staff report, you talk about different types of dwellings and the ones that tier 1 would apply to. And particularly with note, the duplexes, I found a little confusing, if you could explain that one.
So there are exemptions in the ordinance, and they do exempt out small residential projects. So that's any residential project consisting of fewer than 20 multiple family dwelling units, or fewer than 10 single family dwelling units, all under kind of one project, like if that was a subdivision, and then fewer than 7 duplexes. So again, if you're trying to do maybe a subdivision and you're looking to have 7 or more duplexes, then the ordinance would kick in. But if you're under that threshold, you're not going to be subject to the TDM ordinance, because generally speaking, those projects don't generate 100 average daily trips.
And under the last one with the duplex, and it has, as an example, fewer than 14 duplex dwelling units.
So 7 duplexes, 2 units each, 14 units.
I see. Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, I have one question.
Okay, Councilmember Cunningham. Wait, were you done?
Yes,
Okay.
thank you.
Thank you. Page 108, item F. Could you please explain that, please?
That exemption is giving us the department, the director, some latitude to exempt a project that may be providing an environmental benefit where perhaps it would be subject to the ordinance because of some of the other thresholds we have, rather than not just exclusively 100 average daily trips, but maybe the project valuation exceeds the $500,000. But if it's not really going to have a negative impact, say it's a large, maybe it's a large solar array,
I see.
that's not really having a major impact on TDM, but because of the valuation, it would be subject. But this gives us the latitude to say, no, you don't need to be subject to TDM.
Okay, get it. Got it. Thank you. Actually, can we just read that? I'm just going to read it, so if anybody's watching is wondering what on earth I just asked you a question about. Projects with environmental benefits. Any project as determined by the Community Development Director which results in an environmental benefit to the city and will not generate new ADT, including projects, average daily trips, including projects with which generate localized trips but displace other existing trips or are under 100 average daily trips. Thanks.
Councilmember Lentz.
All right, thank you. First off, I just want to say thank you for a great document. Karen and I, worked with you all, trying to put this thing together, and I appreciate you taking our feedback and putting it into the document. And, it's got teeth and flexibility built into it, and I think that's a really smart way to go about when you're trying to actually do something new and creative, right? Building upon what CCAG has done at the countywide level, and then applying, the TDM that, really is representative of what's going on in our city. So on page 100, in the first paragraph, it talks about match CCAG's performance standards for residential uses. So you guys are much more aggressive in the commercial side, but here you are matching the residential part that CCAG is applying. Why did you decide to do that?
Let me make my consultant earn his money here. I didn't understand
Yeah, there you go.
residential are less intensive in terms of generating trips. And so, right sizing, maybe we thought the CCAG regulations were right sized for that, but I'll defer to Matt.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Councilmember Lentz. My name is Matt Goyne with Fair and Peers. We helped the city with this ordinance. And so really what this ordinance is really trying to get at as the biggest traffic generators that are on the horizon for Brisbane. And really that is employment uses. And part of the challenge with the peninsula is adding jobs to the peninsula generally has more of an environmental impact in that the vehicle miles traveled are long because there's a lot of employees coming from places such as the East Bay. And so really this ordinance is trying to address the kind of the biggest generators and the specifically some of the thresholds that are stronger than CCAG are similar to those that South San Francisco, for example, recently adopted for the East of 101, which has a lot of the same context, the same types of developments that are coming in. While on the residential side, there's really no communities that are adopting kind of stricter thresholds than what CCAG has already adopted, since generally that's pretty appropriate for wherever you are on the peninsula.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really trying to address that kind of what's happening in South San Francisco, east of 101, Sierra Point, Brisbane, large life science type of projects that are drawing people from all over the region.
Sure. No, that makes sense. Thank you for
Yeah.
that. Let's see, on page 101, I know actually it's also on page 100. It's, talking about that threshold for construction costs, right? So we're using the $500,000 as the trigger amount. And, but then on the next page, right, you have the pie chart and you're showing what, other potential properties could be included in the mix if it was at a lower threshold, say 250,000. So I'm kind of curious, like how you came up with the $500,000 threshold, and are there any negatives of having a 250,000 instead?
Well, I mean, it's not exactly a bright line. I mean, it is a policy decision.
Mm-hmm.
The $500,000 we felt would typically represent a significant investment on a property to improve it. And if you're going to make that significant investment, then the idea of requiring some TDM to go along with that project with the additional investment was appropriate. Could that number be lower? It could, but, again, I couldn't honestly say, some of the lower end of that threshold. Some of these TIs, you can get to $200,000 pretty quickly with what seemed to be relatively minor improvements to a building. But that certainly is the council's option. If you want to set up the lower threshold, you can.
Okay. Yeah, that's something I like to talk with you guys about, see if that makes sense. Let's see, enforcement of fines. So, I know there's like the breakdown of, how that would go, though, sometimes trying to, receive those fines can be difficult. So I was hoping maybe you can just kind of walk us through how that process would be if someone was not in compliance.
So for something that's not in compliance, you'd be subject to kind of almost what's our standard kind of code enforcement process. You get a notice of violation, and you get time to correct that. You get time to cure that. And if you are unable to cure it, or I shouldn't say unable, if you're unwilling to cure it, then the next step would be an administrative citation that's set out kind of already in our Brisbane Municipal Code. That would be for our Tier 1 and Tier 2 projects under the TDM ordinance. But since Tier 3 projects are those big employment centers that have the heaviest impacts, the current fine structure in the ordinance, or excuse me, in the municipal code is kind of on the small side for these, 50,000 plus square foot campuses. So the recommendation is to have a fine structure that is kind of tied to the number of employees. They would also get a little more time to correct, though, since these Tier 3 projects need a full-on TDM plan. They have more measures. So they would, if they were non-compliant, they would basically have 1 year to comply, which is when their next annual report is due on how they're doing. And if they're unsuccessful that time, they are directed to work with commute.org to try a little harder. And then when they're not successful, then the fines and the penalties would come in.
Okay. And then it would be the city of Brisbane sending out a fine to the entity that pulls the permit, or would they be sending it out to a tenant, like one of the pharmaceutical companies? How does that work?
I think whoever pulled the permit, they're the ones who are on the hook under the ordinance.
Okay, so if there's a developer, they pull the permit, then they have their tenant. We're dealing with that developer who pulled the permit, it's up to them to work with their tenant.
Correct.
Okay.
That seems challenging. I don't know.
That's pretty typical, though, of any code violation, because, you have, sometimes you have absentee owners. So it really depends on who's doing the activity that's creating the violation. So it's actually easier in this case to have someone tied to the permit because it's just easier to have a source of
To always have a
person
They're known
with
entity,
responsible party
right?
to identify.
Tenants come and go.
Yeah,
I
exactly.
guess they could just pass along any fines.
They could, absolutely. And also built into this ordinance, or not the ordinance itself, but the implementation strategy, there's a number of requirements in terms of obligation of the property owner to notify the tenants of requirements so they're aware of what their obligations are under the TDM as well. So,
Yeah, I guess they could just build it into the lease that has to be submitted every
annually.
year. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, there's a section in the ordinance, page 111, and so I'm assuming that's what it is. It's item A3 on page 111, where it talks about the tenant concurrence letter. So is that like something from us that goes to the entity that pulls the permit, and then they're kind of responsible to give that to a potential tenant when they working out all their paperwork for their lease?
So the tenant concurrence letter is one of the submittal items. Say when a project comes in and they're trying to get their building permit or their planning permit. When they're triggering the TDM ordinance, they need to provide documentation that they're implementing the trip reduction measures. And if applicable, depending on their tier, then they might need to include this tenant concurrence letter so that they're telling us we have notified our tenants that they are responsible for their part.
Okay, great. No, I think that's really smart having that in place. Going back to page 104, what you were talking about, Colleen, in regards to the impact fee, could go towards, like a shuttle, I guess a city-owned shuttle. I mean, South City's got the $29 per square foot, so they're the high rent city. I guess there's some cities that charge $2 and South City's at 29. They do have their own shuttle, so maybe that's where part of that's funded. Who knows? But just kind of thinking of some of our own needs, and this is something that you've talked about, Colleen, about the safety of Bayshore, right? Could we apply some of these fees if we implemented this impact fee to making Bayshore more safe?
Absolutely.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Is that it for you?
I just got a couple more. Let's see. There's this parking cash out that needs to be implemented if you're a tier 3 property owner. So what does that mean?
Thanks, Councilmember. Parking cash out is basically the inverse of charging for parking, but instead you can drive and not pay to park, but if you don't drive, you get cash, some additional like bonus that the company offers. And so that's a pretty common way for employers to build in the cost of parking into their programs, and as an incentive rather than a penalty.
Got it.
They could do like also if you did like a carpool or something with other employees
Yep. And so that's,
instead of just like biking, maybe someone is driving, but because there's an organized carpool. I know that they did that at Cliff Bar, had like an incentive program where I think they did like Cliff Bucks or something where there was like credit given at the cafeteria or something like that.
exactly. It could take many different forms, and carpool incentives are just preferential parking, for example, for carpool is built into this as well.
That's cool.
All right. And then the last question is that, you know, in the ordinance, it mentions Appendix A a few times. When you go into Appendix A, it's much more detailed. So how do, you know, I mean, I just don't want, you know, the folks that are going to be subjected to the TDM plan, you know, to, you know, perhaps not know where all the details are. So are you planning to put some of these items in Appendix A into the ordinance itself?
No, we would make this available, though, through the city's website. Any information we have about permitting, if you're subject to TDM, you know, if your project is this, and we provide links to the appropriate forms, the appropriate list of requirements. So anybody who applies for a permit at any given stage, earlier on, they'll understand what the requirements are up front. So it'll be built into more of our administrative support, not in the ordinance per se.
Got it. Okay, great. Thank you. That's it.
Okay. We'll now open it up for public comment.
There are no members of the public wishing to speak, Madam Mayor.
Okay, we'll move on to council discussion. Councilmember Lentz, would you like to start?
Sure. So, you know, one of the items that's, you know, in here that I think is really important is, you know, the ability to have already existing properties to be a part of this if they do a remodel, right? So, and I mean, I don't know if in this, John, maybe you might want to just comment on, I mean, you know, phase 3 is almost done with their project, but I know that they keep coming back for permits. And of course, when they do something, it's well over $500,000. You know, is there a possibility that perhaps there could be a way for them to then be required to do this, even though they have a development agreement?
We'd have to do some research with the city attorney because they already have a TDM plan that's approved.
Mm-hmm.
So we'd, you know, one have to analyze whether it's meets the ordinance or not. And if it does fall short, again, given the fact that there is a development agreement, we'd have to check with legal counsel whether we could impose different standards than were in place when the DA was approved.
Okay, all right. So, yeah, so I mean, we have projects in the industrial park, right, that might be, you know, in need of an upgrade, right? Maybe they do reach the 500,000 threshold. Maybe it's 300,000, but, you know, it would be nice to get as many of these property owners into, you know, one of these tiers. You know, of course, there's only so many. There's only a handful of the tier 3, which are the big, you know, providers of cars on the road. So, but yeah, you know, just kind of curious to see what you all thought, and you know, with that.
This is a question, I guess, for John. Just dovetailing off what Councilmember Lentz just said. Is there a way that instead of waiting for a permit to be pulled at the $500,000 threshold, that we could actually bring in some of the existing businesses based upon a kind of a roll-in program based on number of employees? So that we said in the first part of this would be new development, but for existing business, we're going to have a couple years to bring in the rest of our businesses based on number of employees.
I'm not familiar with any ordinances that do that. I don't know if Matt is. I think that'd be we'd have to have, that wasn't the way this ordinance was structured. So we'd have to consult with legal counsel as to could that be done, how that would be done. It's almost like a reverse amortization. You know, you have to build in a little bit of time for people to comply. But I know, Matt, if you have some thoughts on that.
I can't answer the question that directly of examples, but I can note how, for example, in Cedar Point, the shuttles currently are not managed by commute.org, for example. They're privately managed as an amenity. And so the point of this ordinance is really to bring them into the kind of broader commute.org fold and operate them in a more kind of efficient manner for all of, not just as amenity, but as a trip reduction strategy. So to the extent that this ordinance is now setting up the framework for new developers that come in, you know, participating in that program, it certainly provides the incentive to bring others on board to just
Right.
collaborate on a more efficient system.
I'm thinking of what Councilmember Lentz alluded to. We have a lot of businesses in Crocker Industrial Park.
Yeah.
And many of them have in excess of 25, 50, 100 employees. And so they would not be under this unless they pulled a permit.
That's correct, yeah.
But they can be served by the commute.org program, right? Like,
But do we,
Voluntary.
right, but it's
Yeah.
voluntary. So
Yeah.
I'm talking about rolling something in that would make it mandatory based upon our resolve to comply with the county strategies.
I think one of the issues is that with any new development, it's really easy to limit parking. But with existing development, if they have an ample parking lot, which a lot of these Crocker, you know, spaces do, there is already a way for them to, you know, have all of their staff park on site.
You're correct,
So-
but it's the traffic
No,
that's
I
going to
know,
be
but
the
I think
issue.
that it's like, it's easy to get your employees to comply when they're finding it a struggle to park on site.
Right, but it's not just the parking, it's the actual congestion. And even if we had to write a separate amended ordinance to deal with existing businesses, to just, if nothing else, I'm not even thinking of eliminating their parking, but where we require some sort of a TDM plan to encourage people to drive less and use commute.org.
Okay. Well, I don't think that's necessarily exactly what we're contemplating in this moment, but how do you feel about the ordinance as it's written?
I just have a couple comments. On the fines, I appreciated the thought, considering the basic fines by code are pittance,
Yeah.
and using employees as a structure. That was a really great idea. I like that.
That's good.
Also, I wanted to call attention, I appreciated back on page 127, in looking at number of vehicle trips, the notation about local serving retail development tends to shorten trips. I think that's just, I like that because it calls attention to the fact that we need more tax revenues, and this also would help the number of vehicle mile trips for our whole community, both the business community and the residents. I would ask that, let me find the page. On 108, which is your ordinance page 1.4, that item number F, where you talked about will not generate new ADT, I stumbled over that for a long time, trying to figure out what ADT was. Could you please just spell that one out? Average daily trips, because there's no prior reference to it in the document. And other than that, I like the idea of the impact fees. I really appreciate all the work, not just staff, but also that the ad hoc committee put into this. It's really well thought.
Excellent.
Through the mayor, I have one, I was consulting with Planner Robbins over here. Just want to make sure it's clear because it wasn't clear to me necessarily. This whole criteria, you know, the 100 average daily trips or ADT or the 500,000, you know, construction. It's basically if a project, say if you have a project in Crocker Park that's generating more than 100 ADT already, and they come in for a permit of any value, we'd be able to capture them under the 100 trip criteria. It doesn't have to get to the $500,000. So in a way, the sense the ordinance is capturing any activity on projects that already generate 100 plus trips daily.
And that could be just because if they're freight forwarding, right, would that count? Because, you know, some of these, let's say that somehow we get an Amazon distribution center. Those are tons of trips, and it's not necessarily employees going to work, but that's part of it. But then there's a lot of vehicle trips as a part of the business.
I think this is primarily, and Matt, maybe you want to jump in. I believe this is primarily vehicle trips, not truck trips toward that criteria. But
because they contribute. I mean, they contribute to the traffic immensely.
I mean, 100 daily trips is pretty low if we're talking about a facility. I mean, that's 50 employees per day, for example, coming in, coming out, and they make other trips as well. But in terms of what TDM can do, TDM focuses on really on the commute trip is what the primary focus of.
Yes. Anything else?
On that point of the vehicles coming in and out, it's not just the trucks. Say Amazon Fresh, for example, uses a lot of regular Joes who are working and using their own vehicles like Lyft to deliver the groceries. Lots. So, and that's not trucks, that's just regular vehicles coming in and out. How many times a day? Are we able to capture any of that, John?
it's been pointed out, if you look at the definition on page 106 of average daily trip, I think it covers inclusive of all sort of forms. It talks about inclusive auto, freight, and other motorized travel. So I think we cast a pretty large net. So.
Got it, thank you.
That's important.
Thank you, John.
John, I got a question for you. So, say a property owner pulls a permit, and then, you know, the project's $200,000. And then 6 months later, they come back and they pull another one and it's $200,000. And then the next year they pull another one and it's $200,000. So, you know, they've kind of staggered. Is it cumulative, or like, or is it like just within a year, or how does that work?
It's not cumulative, but in your example, maybe their improvements are altering the existing floor area, and under our current municipal code, there's kind of this 5-year rolling period that is kind of cumulative for that 5-year period. So if they cross the threshold of 50%, even though they kind of piecemealed it over 3 permits, maybe the valuation didn't capture them, but the 50% rule would catch them.
Okay. All right.
Good point.
So what do you guys think? Is 500,000
I
too
think that-
high? Or
no,
you wanna do
that's
it low? Or
low.
you
I think
You wanna-
that's
you
low.
want to leave it?
I'm inclined to leave it.
I am
think
too.
that I think that you guys have done a great job. That I don't want to. I don't want to pick it apart at this point. I think it's written really well. I think it's so easy to spend $500,000.
Okay.
You have to. You
I'm
barely
good
could
with
do
that.
anything, especially in commercial. It's like the amount of money for commercial construction is through the roof. So, I think that that's a fair
Yeah.
amount.
And Cliff, I'm thinking when you said that of the really small commercial lessees that we have in the park. That they're probably on a razor thin edge financially anyway. I don't want to put any more burden on the little guy.
Okay.
So, I'm happy to move forward and introduce the ordinance. So, does staff want us to make a motion to introduce the ordinance and then separate from that, just verbally direct you on items 2 through 5?
That would be fine by me.
Okay, so we don't need to roll all of that into one motion?
No, they can be considered independently. And I defer to the city attorney if he wants formal motions on 2 through 5, which are direction, or Clay, if he has a preference. I don't have a preference.
For me, 490.
Oh, you're muted, Tom.
It's really up to Clay. It can be done either way.
I think 4 nodding heads would be fine.
Okay. Would anyone on the subcommittee like to do the honors?
I'll make that motion.
All right, I'll second.
Okay. Roll call vote.
Councilmember Cunningham.
Aye.
Councilmember Lentz.
Aye.
Councilmember Mackin.
Aye.
Councilmember O'Connell is absent. Mayor Davis.
Aye. And so with that, we will also direct staff to proceed on items 2 through 5. Okay. Moving on to staff reports. Item R, city manager's report on upcoming activities.
Okay, give me a second here. Okay, as you probably have seen in the Blast Star luminary signboards and the Brisbane social media sites, that the Open Space and Ecology Committee has a survey out regarding a potential dark skies ordinance that they've been working on for the past year with the sustainability and planning staff. We are encouraging all interested residents to complete it by October 15th. Note that this is an anonymous survey and you can find it at the Brisbane City website, brisbaneca.org. As we are all aware, this Saturday, October 7th, is the annual Day in the Park. Festivities will begin with a derby car race at 8 a.m., followed by a new item, the adult big wheel race, immediately following. There will be close to 40 vendor booths this year, lots of activities for the whole family along Old County Road, including San Mateo County Libraries, Makermobile, Lions Tri-Tip sandwiches, which can be pre-ordered through tomorrow at 4 p.m. at brisbanelions.org, a pie eating contest, and a baking contest. Note our Volunteer of the Year will be recognized at the Festival Lights this year instead of on Saturday, but we will be recognizing our Youth Volunteer of the Year at 1 p.m. At the park.
Excellent.
I just have one really important thing. Have they finalized who's going to be the person judging the pie eating or the pie baking
Yes,
contest?
there's
I mean,
apparently 6 people, and I said the mayor absolutely needed to be. I heard Councilmember Cunningham edged her way in to be a judge, and I said, well, I think the mayor needs to be a judge.
I just volunteered because they needed a volunteer.
Apparently
You can
they-
have it.
Apparently there's 6 people, and I said today, hey, I think you need 7 because it's got to be, you got to have an odd number. And
Honorable
so we
Madam
might
Mayor.
have to arm wrestle for it.
Honorable Madam Mayor, I would happily step down and give you that honor.
We can just, we'll just eat pies and, all together.
Smush your face
So
in it.
come eat some pie.
Yeah.
Cliff.
Yeah. No, okay. I will be there.
Yeah. Okay, great. Is that aligned with your race?
You
A
know,
day?
sometimes you have to make, tough
But it's on the same
decisions.
day,
So, I mean,
right?
Yeah.
It's on the same day,
Yes.
right?
It is.
You're
So
gonna
the
need to
race,
replenish
yeah,
those
so the
calories.
race, if anyone out there is kind of feeling the urge to run a half marathon on San Bernardino Mountain, race starts at 9 o'clock. Registration starts around 7:30. They can show up at Corey Road and sign up and race, and then come back
How many
to
pie?
Community Day in the Park and,
Yeah.
and have
Eat
pie and all kinds of goodies.
Tri-tip,
Mm-hmm.
awesome. All right, so we'll move on to countywide assignments and subcommittee reports. I didn't have anything, I don't think. Does anyone have anything to report? Oh, okay.
Peninsula Clean Energy, September 28th. Have a couple of interesting things to tell you. It was noted that more and more apartments and condos are utilizing, PCE has a technical assistance line to learn about installing EV chargers. And it's interesting that what's driving this, they've learned, is that more and more tenants, especially in apartment buildings, are demanding EV chargers or they won't rent units. So now everyone's calling and the number of requests have just almost doubled in the year 2023. And also what they've noticed is that in prior years, the number of EV chargers that were being installed per location is also doubling. So people are thinking ahead that there's going to be more electric vehicles. And also we asked whether these are free, because some landlords might say, oh, am I paying for it? And no, most of them have billing systems. So the tenants are paying for the charging. And it was noted that there's a goal PCE has to but facilitate 3,500 charging station installations by the end of next year.
Oh, wow.
Huge.
That's great.
And so a lot of these are multi-unit buildings and elsewhere. We reviewed a lot of legislation going on in Sacramento. I won't bother you with all of that, but a couple key takeaways. We have a new Speaker of the State Assembly, Mr. Rivas. You may know that already. And we learned that Diane Pappin, who's our Assembly member, has been made Speaker's Majority Whip for Research and Policy. And finally, of interest, we've had discussions here about legislation. There's SB 537 that pertains to the Brown Act and public meetings. Everybody was waiting anxiously to see what was going to happen with that. And it got amended and amended and amended. And where it ended up was it was only allowing remote attendance on multi-jurisdictional boards. That's where certain members have to travel over 40 miles to physically attend a meeting. That's where that bill ended up. It received fierce opposition from the ACLU, all kinds of public media, newspapers, journalists, and it fell short of votes. However, it has been said it's coming back in 2026. That's all I have.
Opposition because it doesn't allow for enough remote? Or opposition because it allows for remote at all?
The prevailing wind, what we were told by our legislative component of PCE, is that the legislature and the public did not have the appetite for modifying the Brown Act this year.
Okay.
They absolutely detested the idea. The press was afraid of not having access, because you can imagine a meeting, they can see the meeting, but they can't interview you before or after. Some of the other steep opposition was in the Central Valley, where you had really small communities, and they said, oh my God, then some of this is going to be not available. We like to go in person. And
You can still go in person.
Well, and there were people that said, we'll set up remote broadcast in our city hall chambers so anybody can come watch. That wasn't okay. So a lot of small communities, Central Valley, opposed this.
Great.
So
Okay.
but I mean, noted for PCE, we have the board member in Los Banos travels extensively. I mean, that's a long way to go and get out of a meeting at 9, 10 o'clock at
Yeah,
night.
it's ridiculous.
So it's a real hardship for some people.
How many miles do you think that is?
To Los Banos?
From the PCE office? They ever say how long it takes them?
No, I don't remember exactly, but it's got to be over 50 miles one way.
And we talk about vehicle miles traveled. We talk about reducing our vehicle
It's so
miles traveled.
hypocritical.
We talk
It's
about single
ridiculous.
occupancy vehicles. We talk about
Yeah,
all of
it's-
this. This is hypocrisy at its best.
It is. Okay. Anyway, anyone else?
I did attend the LPMG meeting on Terry's behalf. She wasn't there, so
Local
I got.
policymaker group?
Yes,
Okay.
yeah. And so it was a great meeting, actually, and they were talking about the Go Pass and how, they got this program where, like, if you're 18 and under, right, you can ride the train for $1. They have this program where, like, say, for example, Facebook decides to partner with Caltrain, then they would be required to provide every employee with one of these Go Passes, right? And so say they have 1,000 employees, right? They'd be on the hook for 1,000 Go Passes. But then, of course, not all the employees would use it because they're not riding Caltrain. Then those passes would then get donated to communities in need so that then they could ride the train for free. So it's just this program trying to get more people to ride Caltrain again, like it was prior to the pandemic. And, hopefully we'll get there. But, they're doing whatever they can to generate interest. So, that meeting was quite interesting.
Did you have anything?
Economic Development Subcommittee meetings, which we will be speaking about at a later date.
Yeah, I think that's next meeting. We'll put out on that. Okay. Do we have any written communications?
The council received written communication from Stephen Kirkus, hot asphalt sign from the 22nd.
Okay. Oral communications number 2. Is there any member of the public wishing to speak on an item at this time?
No, Madam Mayor.
Okay, and we will now adjourn the meeting at 8:53 p.m. Thank you.